Have you ever wondered why certain people are chosen for extraordinary things, seemingly out of nowhere? The Bible introduces us to a man named Abram, later known as Abraham, with surprising abruptness. Before Genesis chapter 12, there's a distinct silence, a void of information about his past, his upbringing, or any apparent reason for his significance. Yet he is suddenly the recipient of an extraordinary divine calling, a pivotal moment that reshapes not just his life, but the entire course of human history. This striking lack of preliminary detail creates a profound theological intrigue, inviting us to ponder the deeper mystery of divine selection. Why Abraham? What was it about this man that drew the attention of the Almighty? This journey aims to illuminate this very question, to delve into the unspoken moments before his renowned call. We are not just exploring an ancient narrative, but a profound spiritual principle. God often chooses without human explanation, revealing a purpose that transcends our logic or foresight. Abraham's story, in its unexpected beginning, speaks deeply to our own sense of divine purpose, to the whispers of destiny that might emerge in our own lives without a clear precedent. It asks us to consider how the hand of the divine orchestrates events from behind the veil of our understanding, picking individuals for monumental tasks even before the world takes notice. Many approach the stories of ancient patriarchs as distant historical accounts, but Abraham's initial encounter with God is a powerful testament to a sovereign plan already in motion. It challenges us to look beyond the surface, to discern the subtle workings of a God who sees potential and purpose long before it manifests. This journey is about uncovering the spiritual currents that led to one of the most significant moments in biblical history, a moment that echoes with the timeless truth that divine encounters often begin in unexpected places with unexpected people. The questions surrounding Abraham's initial encounter with the divine are not mere academic curiosities. They hold keys to understanding God's nature, His methods, and perhaps His plan for each of us. By exploring the quiet moments before Genesis chapter 12, we embark on a profound theological adventure, one that promises to deepen our understanding of faith, destiny, and the mysterious, beautiful ways in which God chooses to interact with humanity. Prepare to discover the missing pieces of a puzzle, a revelation that transcends time and offers profound insight into your own walk of faith. To truly grasp the magnitude of Abraham's calling, we must first understand the world he inhabited. He emerged from Ur of the Chaldees, a city not merely a dot on an ancient map, but a vibrant, sprawling metropolis, a beacon of civilization in Mesopotamia. Archaeological discoveries paint a vivid picture of Ur, towering ziggurats dedicated to the moon god Nana, bustling marketplaces, sophisticated legal systems, and a deeply entrenched polytheistic culture. This was a world teeming with gods and goddesses, each demanding worship, each associated with various aspects of nature or human life. Imagine growing up in a place where idols were not abstract concepts, but tangible representations of divine power, present in homes, temples, and public squares. Ur was a hub of religious devotion, where elaborate rituals and sacrifices were commonplace, designed to appease a pantheon of deities. The very air was thick with the pervasive influence of a spiritual landscape, utterly alien to the monotheistic revelation that was about to dawn. It was a world where the idea of a single, invisible, all-powerful God would have been revolutionary, even blasphemous to some. Abraham, then Abram, was steeped in this environment. His family, like countless others, would have participated in the widespread veneration of these deities. What did he believe before the voice of the one true God broke through? We can infer that he lived as others did, molded by the spiritual currents of his time and place. Yet, within this context of pervasive idolatry, something was stirring, an unseen preparation for a monumental shift. The contrast between our spiritual climate and the singular revolutionary faith Abraham was called to embrace could not have been more stark. His home city represented a world of many gods, of human attempts to control the divine through elaborate rituals and carved images. It was a society that found security in numbers, in appeasing all the known powers of the cosmos. Yet it was from this very world, deeply rooted in traditions and superstitions, that God chose to pluck one man. The dramatic departure Abraham was about to make was not just geographical, it was a profound spiritual exodus, a rejection of centuries of established belief for a radical, unprecedented truth. This backdrop of Ur is crucial, for it amplifies the wonder of Abraham's choice. It underscores that God's call is not limited by human environments or existing belief systems. It can penetrate the densest spiritual fog, reaching into the heart of an individual immersed in customs and traditions that seem entirely contrary to the divine will. Yours stands as a powerful symbol of the world from which God calls us, a reminder that the most profound spiritual transformations often begin in the most unlikely of places. Before the thunderous declaration in Genesis chapter 12, was Abraham already being subtly prepared, perhaps even tested by God? The biblical text itself is largely silent on Abraham's early life, yet ancient Jewish traditions and extra-biblical texts offer intriguing glimpses into what might have been. Works like the Book of Jubilees and the writings of Josephus suggest that Abraham was not merely a passive participant in the idolatry of yore. Instead, they portray him as a young man with a discerning spirit, one who began to question the illogical nature of worshiping idols made by human hands. These traditions suggest that even as a youth, Abraham may have recognized the futility of polytheism, perhaps even actively resisting it. Imagine a young Abraham, surrounded by carved images and rituals, yet inwardly sensing a greater unseen power. Stories tell of him challenging his father Terah, an idol maker, or even destroying idols in a quiet act of defiance. While these accounts are not canonical scripture, they reflect a deep theological understanding within ancient Judaism that God's choice was not arbitrary, but perhaps predicated on an inner disposition, a hidden readiness within Abraham's heart. This raises a profound question. Could God's choice have been based on Abraham's inner life, unseen by the world, but fully known by the divine? It suggests a period of silent testing, a time when Abraham, without overt revelation, began to align his heart with a nascent understanding of truth. This aligns with the idea that God often prepares individuals in unseen ways, cultivating a spirit of receptivity or a hunger for something more, long before a clear directive is given. It implies a moral and spiritual integrity that existed before the explicit call to leave Ur. This silent preparation, if indeed it occurred, would elevate Abraham's story beyond a simple sudden command. It would paint a picture of a man whose heart was already turning towards the true God, even amidst a pagan world. It speaks to the idea that God observes, discerns, and knows the inclinations of our hearts, even when our actions remain hidden from human view. This understanding of Abraham's early life suggests a pre-existing sensitivity to the divine, a spiritual spark that was ready to be ignited into a blazing fire of faith. Such a perspective deepens the mystery and beauty of divine election, showing that God sees beyond surface appearances, beyond outward conformity, and directly into the heart. It suggests that Abraham was not a blank slate upon which God etched his will, but a soul already wrestling with truth, already yearning for a more profound connection with the divine, making him uniquely prepared for the monumental task ahead. The selection of Abraham compels us to ponder a fundamental mystery. Why does God choose certain individuals and not others? It is a question that resonates throughout sacred history and touches on the very nature of divine election. With Abraham, we see a powerful demonstration of God's unique perspective, a discernment that operates far beyond human sight or conventional wisdom. He does not choose based on lineage, power, or public renown, but on something far more profound: the unseen potential, the hidden purpose, and the true inclination of the heart. God's choosing of Abraham serves as a focal point for understanding how the divine sees. It is a vision that penetrates superficialities, looking directly into the core of a person's being. knowing what they can become even before they know it themselves. This divine foresight recognizes purity of heart, a willingness to obey, or an underlying spiritual hunger that might be invisible to anyone else. It is a testament to the truth that God's criteria for selection are not human criteria. He often chooses the unlikely, the overlooked, the seemingly unqualified to accomplish His greatest purposes. We see this pattern repeated throughout biblical history. David, chosen from among his brothers, a humble shepherd boy, became king. Mary, a young woman from an obscure town, chosen to bear the Messiah. Paul, a zealous persecutor of Christians, transformed into the apostles' greatest evangelist. In each instance, the choice defied human expectation and logic. It was not based on inherent greatness as defined by the world, but on God's sovereign design and His ability to see beyond the immediate. This principle reveals a compassionate and strategic God who works through individuals who may not appear to be the obvious candidates. It highlights that being chosen is not about perfection, but about divine purpose. It is about God's initiative, His wisdom in seeing a future that we cannot, and His power to shape ordinary lives into vessels for extraordinary destiny. Abraham's story thus becomes a timeless illustration of divine election, reminding us that God's eye sees what ours cannot, and His hand guides those He calls into purposes beyond imagination. The divine act of selection is a beautiful testament to God's nature, a demonstration that His ways are higher than our ways, and His thoughts deeper than our thoughts. It teaches us to look for God's hand in unexpected places, and to trust that when He calls, He sees not just who we are, but who He intends us to become. Abraham, chosen from Ur, stands as an eternal beacon of this truth, a silent testimony to the God who sees with perfect clarity. Genesis chapter 12 reads as a dramatic, sudden pronouncement, "Now the Lord said to Abram, 'Go from your country.'" This singular command appears to be the genesis of Abraham's journey. Yet, a closer look at other biblical texts and ancient traditions suggests that God's call may not have been a single isolated event, but rather a series of whispers, a progressive revelation that unfolded over time, even before His departure from Ur. Consider Genesis 11 verse 31, which states that Terah, Abraham's father, took Abram, Lot, and Sarai, and they went out with them from Ur of the Chaldees to go into the land of Canaan, and they came to Haran and dwelt there. This verse implies an initial intention to go to Canaan, even before the explicit call in Genesis chapter 12. Then, Acts chapter 7 verses 2 to 4, in Stephen's speech, provides a crucial detail. The God of glory appeared to our father Abraham when he was in Mesopotamia, before he lived in Haran, and said to him, "Go out from your land and from your relatives, and come to the land which I will show you." This passage from Acts suggests that Abraham had an encounter with God while still in Mesopotamia, possibly Ur itself, and before settling in Haran. This earlier appearance implies that God's call to Abraham was not a singular, abrupt moment, but perhaps a layered process, a gentle unfolding of divine purpose. It suggests that obedience itself is a progressive journey, not a one-time decision. The initial call in Ur may have planted the seed, inspiring Terah's initial move towards Canaan, even if they paused in Haran. This concept of multiple calls, or a call that deepens and expands over time, highlights the patient and persistent nature of God. He might speak in initial whispers, perhaps nudging us towards a general direction, and then clarify His purpose with more specific instructions as we respond in faith. Abraham's journey from Ur to Haran, and then from Haran to Canaan, could represent a series of steps in obedience, each building upon the previous one. It was not a single leap of faith, but a succession of faithful movements. Understanding this nuanced progression allows us to see Abraham's initial response not as perfect, immediate comprehension, but as a willingness to begin, even if the full picture was not yet revealed. It reinforces the idea that God often prepares us for greater revelations through smaller acts of obedience, guiding us step by step into his fuller purpose. This continuous unfolding of God's call makes Abraham's journey deeply relatable, showing that even the greatest figures of faith often embarked on their destiny one obedient step at a time. Abraham's obedience to God's call required more than simply packing his belongings and walking away from Ur. His departure was a profound act of separation, an inner exodus that demanded he leave behind not just a geographical location, but the very fabric of his existence. He was called to forsake his family ties, the cultural norms that defined him, the security of a known home, and perhaps even deeply ingrained aspects of his own worldview. Imagine the emotional and spiritual weight of severing connections to everything familiar, everything that had shaped his identity until that moment. To leave his land meant abandoning the gods of his ancestors, the social structures that provided support, and the established customs that governed daily life. It was a step into an unknown future, guided only by the voice of an unseen God. This journey was not just a physical migration. It was a radical reorientation of his entire being, a spiritual shedding of his former self. The call to follow God often involves such a painful letting go, a process of surrendering old certainties for new, divine possibilities. This act of separation serves as a powerful metaphor for the inner transformations many people must undergo when God calls them to a new path. It is the challenging process of releasing old habits, old ways of thinking, or old relationships that no longer align with divine purpose. Abraham's journey highlights the truth that faith often requires a willingness to stand apart, to be distinctly different from the prevailing culture, to walk a road less traveled, even when it means loneliness or misunderstanding. The spiritual weight of his journey reminds us that true obedience is rarely convenient. It demands courage to step out of comfort zones and embrace the uncertainty that accompanies divine direction. Abraham's departure from Ur was not merely an event. It was a defining moment of surrender, a declaration that his ultimate allegiance lay with the God who called him above all other loyalties. This journey became a crucible, forging his faith through the fire of separation, preparing him for the monumental role he was destined to play. His radical departure set the precedent for countless spiritual journeys thereafter, teaching that sometimes, to truly follow God, we must be willing to leave behind what is familiar, even what is good, for the sake of what is divine. It is in this act of separation that true faith is often born and nurtured, a beautiful yet often painful process of divine transition. Before God formalized his relationship with Abraham through the grand covenants described in Genesis chapter 15 and chapter 17, Abraham was already walking by faith. He was following God's voice and directions, even without the explicit contractual agreements, without the detailed blessings and guarantees that would later be articulated. What does it truly mean to trust God when there is no written contract, no tangible promise yet in hand, only a whispered instruction and an unseen destination? It speaks to a profound level of spiritual courage. Abraham's early faith was not a response to a clear, signed document. It was a deeply personal reliance on the character of God himself. He stepped forward into the unknown based solely on who he perceived God to be, not on what God had explicitly promised to give him. This kind of trust is perhaps the purest form of faith, one that transcends the desire for immediate reward or visible assurance. It is the courage to act, to move, to leave, simply because the divine voice has spoken. Consider the immense uncertainty Abraham faced. He left his home and journeyed into a land he had never seen, populated by people he did not know, all based on a verbal command. There were no immediate signs of success, no grand entourage, no instant blessings upon arrival. His early journey was marked by tents, not palaces, by transient living, not settled security. Yet he persevered, demonstrating a deep spiritual fortitude that looked beyond immediate circumstances. This pre-covenant faith illustrates a vital principle. Our relationship with God often begins with a leap of trust that precedes any clear understanding of the outcome. It teaches us that authentic faith is not contingent on guarantees, but on the very nature of the one who calls. Abraham's willingness to step forward, even into ambiguity, reveals a profound spiritual maturity, a readiness to follow simply because it is God who leads. It was a faith rooted in the absolute reliability of the divine, a trust that God's intentions were good, even when the path ahead was shrouded in mystery. His example encourages us to cultivate a faith that does not demand a contract before it acts, but instead trusts the integrity and wisdom of the caller. It is a faith that steps forward based solely on who God is, embracing the journey with courageous surrender, long before any formal promises are unveiled. Later in his journey, God took Abraham outside and told him to look up at the stars, declaring that his descendants would be as numerous as they were. This poetic image, however, carries a deeper theological truth than mere quantity. It subtly hints at the profound idea that Abraham, and indeed his lineage, was always part of the divine plan, a purpose that existed not just from the moment of his call, but from eternity itself. The stars, ancient and fixed in the firmament, symbolize a plan that was always there, immutable and vast, long before Abraham ever took his first breath. This chapter delves into the majestic concept of God's eternal foresight and grace. It suggests that Abraham was chosen not merely because of who he was in the moment, but because of who God always intended him to become, and the pivotal role he would play in the unfolding narrative of salvation. God's promises were not reactive. They were woven into the very fabric of time before creation itself. Abraham was a chosen vessel for a pre-existing, divine intention. This perspective elevates Abraham's story from a simple historical account to a profound revelation of God's sovereignty. It reveals that the divine plan for humanity, including the promise of a Savior, was established before the foundations of the world. Abraham was a key figure in this eternal purpose, chosen not by chance, but by deliberate, ancient design. His life became a tangible manifestation of promises that had always existed in the divine mind. The image of the stars speaks to the vastness and unchanging nature of God's intentions. Just as the stars endure across millennia, so too do God's purposes remain steadfast. Abraham was brought into a narrative much larger than himself, a story that began in eternity and continues to unfold across generations. His election was a testament to God's unwavering commitment to his plan, a plan that would ultimately bless all the families of the earth through his lineage. This reflection invites us to marvel at the majesty of divine wisdom, which orchestrates human lives to fulfill eternal decrees. Abraham's call was not just a historical event. It was the unfolding of a preordained destiny, a clear sign that God works according to his eternal purposes, drawing individuals into his grand, redemptive narrative. Abraham's single act of obedience, his decision to leave Ur and follow the voice of God, did not merely alter his own life. It sent an unprecedented ripple effect across the entire course of human history. From that solitary choice, a lineage emerged that would reshape the spiritual and physical landscape of the world. Through his son Isaac and then Jacob came the 12 tribes, which would form the nation of Israel, a people uniquely set apart to bear witness to the one true God amidst a polytheistic world. The impact of Abraham's choice extends far beyond the borders of ancient Israel. His descendants included prophets, kings, and ultimately, the Messiah himself, Jesus Christ. The covenant made with Abraham, promising through him all the families of the earth would be blessed, finds its ultimate fulfillment in the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus. Without Abraham's initial act of faith, the very foundation of the redemptive narrative, culminating in the Christian faith, would not exist as we know it. This chapter underscores a powerful truth. Every act of obedience, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant, can trigger generational blessings and spiritual revolutions that extend far beyond our immediate comprehension. Abraham's choice was not just personal. It was foundational for countless generations. influencing laws, moral codes, and religious practices for thousands of years. It demonstrates how a single individual, responding to a divine call, can become an instrument for world-changing transformation. The ripple effect of Abraham's faith continues to this day, impacting billions across the globe. His story stands as a monumental testament to the power of individual obedience to God's voice. It encourages us to recognize that our own choices, when aligned with divine purpose, can create profound and lasting impacts far beyond what we might imagine. One person's willingness to surrender and obey can set in motion a chain of events that blesses families, communities, and even nations. From a single nomadic tent to the global reach of Abrahamic faiths, the trajectory of history was irrevocably altered because one man chose to listen and obey. This profound legacy reminds us that destiny is often shaped not by grand armies or empires, but by the quiet, faithful steps of individuals who dare to follow a divine whisper. Abraham's story, a tale of ancient encounters and monumental choices, is not merely a historical record. It holds a profound mirror to our own lives. If God chose Abraham, a man from an idolatrous background with no apparent prior qualifications, then the question naturally arises, what does it mean to be called by God today? The same God who whispered to Abraham in Ur continues to speak to individuals across generations with unique assignments, hidden potentials, and eternal purposes waiting to be discovered. Just like Abraham, you too have been uniquely chosen by a divine hand, placed in this specific time and place for a reason. Your life is not an accident, and your experiences are not random. There is a purpose woven into the fabric of your being, a divine intention that longs to unfold through your willingness to respond. This calling may not manifest as a dramatic voice from the heavens or a command to leave your homeland, but it is just as real, just as personal, and just as significant. Being chosen by God does not imply perfection or flawlessness. Abraham himself made mistakes, faced doubts, and navigated complex challenges. His story teaches us that divine selection is not about finding the perfect candidate, but about finding a willing heart, a spirit open to guidance, and a readiness to step into the unknown with faith. It is about an ongoing journey of obedience, learning, and growth, where God shapes us through our responses to His subtle or explicit invitations. Your hidden potential, your unique gifts, and the specific path laid out for you are all part of a divine blueprint. The question is not if you are chosen, but if you are willing to walk in the footsteps of Abraham, listening for the whispers, discerning the nudges, and responding with courage to the divine call on your life. Just as Abraham's journey began with a simple act of leaving, your own purpose might begin with a step of faith, a new direction, or a deeper commitment to the unseen. The enduring legacy of Abraham is a powerful reminder that ordinary people are called to extraordinary purposes when they align their lives with the divine will. You are invited into this same legacy of faith to discover the specific assignment God has for you and to live a life that, like Abraham's, leaves a lasting impact on the world, all because you were willing. As we conclude this exploration into the mysterious encounter before Genesis chapter 12, the story of Abraham echoes with timeless truths about divine selection and human response. His journey reminds us that God sees beyond the surface, calls the unlikely, and shapes destinies through obedience. His faith, born in an idol-worshipping land, laid the foundation for a spiritual lineage that continues to inspire and challenge us today. If this journey through Abraham's story resonated with your heart, if it brought clarity, hope, or stirred a deeper sense of your own divine purpose, we invite you to continue exploring these profound truths with us. Please subscribe to this channel for more faith-filled content that seeks to open the scriptures with depth and reverence. Take a moment to like this video as your engagement helps others discover this message. Leave a comment below and share what impacted you most, or what questions you are still carrying. We truly value every word you share. And above all, consider sharing this video with someone you care about, a friend, a family member, anyone who might need to be reminded that they too are chosen, and their journey with God is just as significant.